It begins not with a voice but with silence, a hush before wisdom enters. A child stands at the edge of the synagogue, watching the elders lean over their ancient books. He sees their lips move but hears no sound. He doesn't understand the words, not yet, but he feels something, a trembling in the soul, a reverence that stills the breath. That moment, that trembling, is where wisdom begins. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Proverbs 1:7, a verse so short, so poetic, that it's easy to miss its radical depth. We often think of wisdom as beginning with curiosity or intelligence or knowledge. But King Solomon begins elsewhere. Not with the mind, but with the heart, with fear. But not the kind of fear we associate with danger. This is not terror, not dread. The Hebrew word is yirat, awe, reverence, the spiritual trembling one feels when standing before something vast and sacred. Why must this be the beginning of wisdom? Let us follow that question into the depths of the Talmud. In Tractate Berakhot 33b, the sages discuss one of the most mysterious and unsettling lines in all of rabbinic literature. Everything is in the hands of heaven, except the fear of heaven. Everything? Life, death, health, wealth, talent, intellect, all in God's hands. Except one thing, reverence, that God cannot give. Why? Because Yirat Shamayim, the fear of heaven, is the essence of being human. It is the one thing that must come from within. You can't inherit it, you can't download it, you can't force it. It must be chosen, felt, grown. The Talmud relates a teaching of Rabbi Chanina. A person does not hurt his finger below unless it was decreed above. In other words, divine providence controls the cosmos, even down to the stubbed toe. But fear of heaven? That's ours. This teaching flips everything we assume. We like to believe we're in control of our careers, our fate, our knowledge. But the Talmud says no, you control your reverence. That's your domain. But why is this so crucial to learning, to Halacha, to wisdom? Here the Talmud offers a parable. A man is traveling through a forest. He comes to a fork in the road. At each path stands a wise man. One is brilliant, quoting verse and logic. The other is humble, quiet, but his eyes carry the weight of heaven. Which path does the traveler take? Which kind of teacher do we trust? In Avot Rabbi Natan, the sages say, anyone whose fear of sin precedes his wisdom endures. But one whose wisdom precedes his fear of sin, his wisdom does not endure. Why? Because wisdom without reverence is cleverness without conscience. It becomes a weapon. History is full of geniuses who lacked humility and left ruin in their wake. But fear of God grounds the mind. It softens the ego. It turns study into service. This is why the Talmud never separates ethics from intellect. Every page is not only a legal puzzle, but a moral training ground. Consider Hillel and Shammai. Shammai was brilliant, strict, quick to measure. Hillel was patient, slow to anger, always humble. And the law? It follows Hillel. Not because Shammai was wrong, but because Hillel's demeanor reflected a deeper fear of heaven. He made his learning accessible. He elevated his opponents. The Talmud says that Hillel's school was worthy because they taught both their own opinions and those of their rivals. That is Yirat Shamayim in action. But what about the inverse? What happens when knowledge runs ahead of reverence? The story of Elisha ben Avuya, known as Acher the Other, haunts the Talmud. He was once a great sage, a scholar of unmatched brilliance. But he lost his way. He entered the mystical realms unprepared. He saw the angel Metatron sitting, which he believed was heresy. He lost his faith, and with it his fear. And with that his wisdom collapsed. He continued teaching, even while in spiritual exile, and the sages continued learning from him. But he had crossed a line. He had severed knowledge from holiness. The Talmud records a stunning image. Fire dances around him as he studies, holy words in an unholy vessel. This is the danger. A brilliant mind without a trembling heart. So how does one cultivate this fear of heaven? Not through fear-mongering, not through guilt, but through awareness. The Talmud teaches, Reflect upon three things, and you will not come to sin. Know what is above you, an eye that sees, an ear that hears, and all your deeds are written in a book. This is not surveillance, it is relationship. To live with Yirat Shamayim is to live as if your life matters, as if your choices echo beyond the moment, as if you are seen. And when a person learns Torah with that awareness, the study becomes something more, not just acquiring information, but encountering God. Rav Soloveitchik wrote, "To learn Torah is to tremble." That's not a poetic metaphor, it's a spiritual reality. But what does this look like in Halachic practice? In Tractat Shabbat, the sages debate whether certain knots are prohibited. The discussion is intricate, technical. And then, out of nowhere, one sage says, "We must be careful, lest we desecrate the Sabbath unknowingly." He isn't raising a new legal point. He's raising a posture, a tone, a fear of heaven. That shift happens throughout the Talmud. And in the Mishneh Torah, Maimonides begins not with the laws of prayer or sacrifice, but with the foundations of reverence. When a person contemplates God's works and his creations, his soul will thirst, his flesh will yearn, and he will be struck with awe. To him, science and Halacha are united, not by reason alone, but by reverence. Yirat Shamayim is the emotional bridge between knowing and kneeling. But let's be honest, awe is hard to maintain. We live in a noisy world. Distractions, debates, pride. These erode the soul's sensitivity. The Talmud addresses this. In Berakhot, it says, "Place the fear of heaven upon yourselves like a cloak." It doesn't say feel it, it says place it, as if putting it on. Sometimes reverence begins as an act, not a feeling. We show respect to the text, we bow, we wash, we whisper God's name. And slowly, the posture shapes the heart. In the end, the Talmud doesn't define Yirat Shamayim in philosophical terms. It tells stories, like the story of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai on his deathbed. His students asked for a blessing. He said, "May your fear of heaven be as great as your fear of other people." They were puzzled. He explained, "When a person sins, he says, 'I hope no one sees me.' But what about God?" That is the core. To live as if God sees us, not to frighten us, but to elevate us. Because when we live with reverence, wisdom follows. And not just wisdom in books, but in love, in justice, in how we treat others. As Proverbs 9:10 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." So who is wise? Not the clever, not the well-read, but the humble. The one who pauses before speaking, who trembles before deciding, who listens more than he talks. The one who studies not to conquer the Torah, but to be conquered by it. In that surrender, wisdom is born. And so we end where we began, with a child at the door of the Beit Midrash, watching, not yet understanding, but feeling something stir. That stirring is Yirat. That trembling is the beginning of all wisdom. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to never miss an episode. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Hebrew Talmud.